tracks in the ice weren't his. Grayson Reynolds stopped the truck halfway up the gravel drive, engine still running, and stared at the shallow impressions cutting through the frozen snow toward the old house. They were recent, maybe an hour, maybe less, barefoot, or close to it. The edges of each print were uneven, like whoever made them had been stumbling. He hadn't been back here in almost a decade. The house had belonged to his sister once, back when family still meant something more than silence and years between phone calls that never came. Now, it just sat here, 20 miles outside of town, waiting to fall apart. He'd told himself he was coming to check the pipes before the freeze got worse. Something practical, something he could explain if anyone asked. But the truth was simpler. It was Christmas Eve, and there was nowhere else he wanted to be. But someone else had been here first. Grayson cut the engine and stepped out into the cold. The wind bit through his coat immediately, sharp and unforgiving. He followed the tracks with his eyes, all the way to the front door, which hung slightly open. No car, no sign of anyone else around, just those prints, and the faint trace of smoke rising from the chimney. Thin, weak, like it was barely holding on. Inside, the air was cold but less brutal. The fire in the hearth was almost dead, just a few damp sticks struggling to burn. And beside it, curled tight on the hard floor, was a boy. Thin, soaked jacket clinging to his frame, bare feet pulled close to his chest, skin red and raw from the cold. He didn't look up right away, just shifted closer to the fading heat, like something that had stopped expecting help. Grayson stood in the doorway, snow melting off his boots, and didn't move. The house didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt occupied by something fragile. The boy's name was Cade Montrose, though Grayson wouldn't learn that for a while. Cade had been walking for hours before he found the house, just another structure at the end of a road no one used anymore. He'd seen the chimney from the main highway and figured it was worth the risk. Empty houses didn't ask questions. He'd broken in through the back door and tried to get a fire going with the scraps he could find. Wet branches, a few pieces of rotted wood from the porch. It wasn't much, but it was something. He hadn't expected anyone to show up, especially not on Christmas Eve, especially not someone who looked at him the way this man was looking at him now. Not with anger, not with pity, just something heavier. Grayson had built his life around predictability, cattle trading, land investments, quiet work that paid well and didn't require much from him emotionally. He had a house 10 miles south and a bank account that allowed him to live without worry. But money didn't keep a house warm, and it didn't make the silence any easier. He'd gotten used to it, the emptiness, the routine, the years slipping by without much to mark them. But standing there, looking at the boy on the floor, he felt something shift. Grayson didn't say anything at first. He just stepped further into the room and crouched down near the hearth, close enough to see the boy's face, but not so close that it felt like a threat. The kid's eyes followed him, wary, calculating, like he was already mapping out the nearest exit. Grayson pulled off his gloves and reached for the pile of damp sticks near the fire. They were useless, too wet, too green. He didn't comment on it, just set them aside and stood. "There's firewood out back," he said. His voice was low, steady. "I'll get it." Cade didn't respond, just watched him leave, eyes sharp and unblinking. Outside, Grayson found the old woodshed still standing. The door hung crooked, but inside, stacked neat and dry, was a cord of split oak he'd stored there years ago. He carried an armload back inside and knelt by the hearth, building the fire properly this time. Paper first, then kindling, then the larger pieces arranged so the air could flow. Within minutes, the flames caught and spread, warm and steady. Cade shifted slightly, drawn toward the warmth, despite himself. Grayson noticed but didn't acknowledge it. He just stood and brushed off his jeans, then walked toward the hallway. "Stay put," he said. He disappeared into the shadows, and Cade heard him moving around, opening doors, dragging something heavy. When he came back, he was carrying 2 old mattresses and a stack of blankets that smelled faintly of cedar. He set them down near the fire without ceremony, then went back for more. Candles, a box of matches, a lantern that still had oil in it. He lit the candles one by one, and the room softened under the flickering light. Grayson finally looked at him directly. "You hurt?" Cade hesitated, then shook his head. "Cold?" A pause, then a small nod. Grayson nodded back. "I'll be right back." He left again, this time heading toward the small storage closet near the kitchen. He found a box on the top shelf covered in dust. Inside were a few sweaters, a pair of boots, thick socks, a winter jacket. He brought it all back and set it down in front of Cade. "Try those," he said simply. Cade stared at the pile, then at Grayson, like he was waiting for the price. But Grayson just turned his back and busied himself with the fire. After a long moment, Cade reached for the socks first. His hands were shaking. He pulled them on slowly, wincing as the fabric touched his raw skin. Then the boots. They were a little big, but they were warm, dry. He didn't say thank you, but something in his posture softened. Grayson glanced over and saw it. He didn't smile, just nodded once and went back to what he was doing. The fire crackled between them. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, for the first time in a long time, the house felt like it was breathing again. By the time the fire had burned low, Grayson stood and walked toward the kitchen. "You eaten today?" Cade didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "No." Grayson opened the cabinets and found a few cans of soup. He heated one slowly, stirring it with a wooden spoon, and the smell filled the room. Simple, warm, ordinary. When it was ready, he poured it into 2 bowls and brought them over. He handed one to Cade along with a spoon, then sat down on the other mattress with his own. Cade held the bowl in both hands, staring down at it. Then he took a bite, then another. He ate quickly, hunched over the bowl. Grayson ate slower, watching the fire. When Cade finished, he set the bowl down carefully. He still didn't look at Grayson directly, but his voice came out low and rough. "Why are you helping me?" Grayson didn't answer right away. He took another spoonful of soup, chewed, swallowed. Then he set his bowl aside. "Because you're here," he said simply. "And it's cold." Cade frowned, like that wasn't enough. But Grayson didn't offer anything else. After a long silence, Cade spoke again, softer this time. "I didn't mean to break in." "I know. I'll leave in the morning." Grayson looked at him then. "You don't have to." Cade's eyes flickered. "What do you mean?" "I mean it's Christmas Eve. You're not going anywhere tonight." He paused. "And tomorrow's Christmas." Cade didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded once, very small, and pulled the blanket tighter around his shoulders. They didn't say anything else. The fire crackled, the candles flickered, and somewhere in the quiet, something unspoken settled between them. Grayson leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. Beside him, Cade curled up on the mattress, boots still on, jacket still zipped. He didn't fall asleep right away, just lay there staring at the fire, feeling the warmth soak into his skin. And for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like he had to keep moving. If you're enjoying this moment with us and would like to hear more stories like this, I'd truly appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also share in the comments where you're watching from. It's always special to see how far these stories travel. Now let's continue. Morning came slow and pale. Grayson woke first, stiff from the floor, and added more wood to the fire before stepping outside. The cold hit him immediately, but the wind had died down. The sky was overcast, heavy with the promise of more snow. When he came back inside, Cade was awake, sitting up with the blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He looked better than he had the night before, but there was still a tightness in his face. Grayson walked to the kitchen and started rummaging through the cabinets. He found instant oatmeal, a jar of honey, and a dented kettle. He filled the kettle with water from a jug and set it on the stove. Cade watched him work. After a moment, he spoke. "You don't have to do this." Grayson glanced over his shoulder. "Do what?" "Feed me. Let me stay." Grayson turned back to the stove. "I know." Cade didn't push further, just pulled the blanket tighter. When the oatmeal was ready, Grayson brought it over with 2 mugs of instant coffee. Black, no sugar. They ate in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, just quiet. After a while, Grayson stood. "I'm going to check the rest of the house." Cade nodded and Grayson disappeared into the back rooms. He moved through the house slowly, opening doors he hadn't opened in years. In one of the bedrooms, his sister's old room, he found a cardboard box sitting on the floor near the closet. He knelt down and opened it. Inside were old photographs, a few Christmas ornaments wrapped in tissue paper, a coffee mug with a faded picture of the 2 of them. He picked up one of the photos, him and his sister at some family gathering, both younger, smiling. He couldn't remember when it was taken. He set the photo back down and closed the box. There was a tightness in his chest. He stood and walked back to the main room. Cade was still sitting by the fire. Grayson sat down across from him. "You got family?" Grayson asked. Cade's jaw tightened. No. Friends? Cade shook his head. Then, after a pause, there was someone. A teacher. She tried to help me. Offered me a place to stay. She was nice. What happened? Cade's voice went quieter. I left. Grayson didn't ask why. He could guess. She didn't deserve that, Cade said almost to himself. But I couldn't stay. I didn't know how. Grayson nodded slowly. I had a sister. We used to talk all the time. Then life got busy. I got busy. He paused. Before I knew it, 10 years went by. Cade didn't say anything, just listened. It's easier to walk away than to stay, Grayson said quietly. The silence that followed was different, heavier. After a while, Cade spoke again. You think it's too late to fix it? Grayson thought about that, about the box in the other room, about the years that had passed. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think the only way to find out is to try. Cade nodded slowly. They spent the rest of the morning in quiet company. Grayson found an old deck of cards and they played a few hands without keeping score. Cade wasn't very good, but he learned fast. By the time the light began to soften, Grayson stood and stretched. He walked over to the window and looked out at the snow-covered fields. The afternoon was fading into dusk. Christmas evening. He turned back to Cade. I should head out soon. Cade nodded, but didn't say anything. Grayson walked over to the pile of clothes he'd brought out the night before and picked up the thickest jacket, a heavy winter coat, lined with fleece. He held it out. Take this. Cade looked at it, then at him. I can't. You can, Grayson said simply. It's cold out there. You'll need it. Cade hesitated, then took the coat slowly. He pulled it on. It fit better than the boots had. He zipped it up and stood there uncertain. Grayson reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper and a pen. He scribbled something down, then handed it to Cade. That's my number. If you need anything. Cade stared at the paper in his hand. Why would you? Because sometimes people need help, and sometimes it's okay to ask for it. Cade's throat tightened. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Grayson pulled on his own coat and grabbed his gloves. He paused near the door, then turned back. You don't have to leave today. The fire's good. There's food. You can stay as long as you need. Cade nodded, but they both knew he wouldn't stay long. That wasn't who he was. Not yet. Grayson opened the door, and the cold air rushed in. He stepped out onto the porch, then glanced back one more time. Merry Christmas, Cade. Cade's voice came out quiet but steady. Merry Christmas. Grayson nodded once, then walked toward his truck. The engine started with a low rumble, and he backed down the drive slowly, careful on the ice. Cade stood in the doorway, watching him go. The cold bit at his face, but he didn't move, just watched until the taillights disappeared around the bend. Then he closed the door and stood there for a long moment, the folded paper heavy in his pocket. He walked back to the fire and sat down, pulling the coat tighter around him. It smelled faintly of wood smoke and something else, something steady. He stared into the flames, thinking about how quickly warmth had found him there, about the man who'd shown up out of nowhere and hadn't asked for anything in return. After a while, he pulled out the piece of paper and unfolded it. A phone number, written in blocky handwriting, and below it just 2 words. Stay warm. Cade stared at it for a long time. Then he folded it back up and slipped it into his pocket again. He didn't know if he'd use it, didn't know if he'd stay or go, didn't know what came next. But for the first time in a long time, he felt like maybe,